You're listening to Free-ish in Higher Ed. Welcome back to Free-ish in Higher Ed. I'm your host, Chelsea, and today my guest is Dr. Kimberly Jones. Dr. Jones is a proud Latina, a first-generation college graduate, and one of the less than 1% of Latinas in the U.S. with a doctorate. She's spent over 15 years in higher education, creating programs that build belonging, empower student leaders, and drive equity from the inside out. Dr. Jones, thank you so much for being here. Can you start by introducing yourself and tell listeners a bit about the work you're doing?
Hello, Chelsea. Thank you so much for having me on this episode. As you mentioned, I am a newly minted doctor. I'm still on cloud nine and feeling extremely proud. This is a huge accomplishment as a first-generation college graduate. You know, through my journey, I represented my family, my ancestors. So, it's a huge deal. As you mentioned, I am part of the 1% of Latinas in the United States who have a doctoral degree, and that's an incredible honor to hold, and yet a huge responsibility as a Latina, as you can imagine, especially with my family and the work that I do in higher education. In my roles within higher education, my responsibility has always been to create a sense of belonging for students and for people as a whole. I am a true believer of collaboration, and so I've collaborated with partners across the institutions where I've worked to develop programming for students, special projects, student leadership development initiatives. I truly see the educational environment as a space for learning for everyone involved, including myself. Each day brings new lessons for me. Each mistake I make makes me a stronger leader. And I try to model that same spirit of growth for my students, especially when I'm guiding and advising them. I truly believe that mentoring students is a way for me to pay it forward because it's a huge opportunity for students. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I wanted to congratulate you on recently obtaining your doctorate degree, but I also wanted to kind of just jump right in and ask what your journey into higher education was like.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. I appreciate the congratulations. It's a huge deal, and I know we'll talk a little bit about it later on in the podcast, but thank you. I'm going to give you some understanding as to why education was important in my household. So I am a first-generation college student. I was raised in a very strict military household. My father was in the military. He was in the Army. And growing up, I just wasn't allowed to spend much time outside. And so from an early age, I was told, you're going to go to college. And it wasn't presented as a choice. It was just an expectation. So that expectation was because my parents knew that education was a way for upward mobility. My early years were not easy. When our family moved from New York to Virginia, I experienced a lot of racism. I was bullied by a group of girls, and it got so bad that my mom had to actually advocate for me at school. And so it took a while for that to get situated. But she always told me a phrase that I always remember, which was fight them with your mind. She didn't mean physical fights. She meant use your education, your intelligence, be the best that you can. And that just became my mantra. So when it came down for college, my family and I honestly didn't know how to navigate the system. So we had to actually fly back to New York because at the time we had been living in Alabama. So I went to high school in Alabama because that's where my father was stationed. So we had to fly back to New York to work with a local nonprofit that helped us figure out where to even start. So shout out to Henry Street Settlement for that in Lower East Side of Manhattan because they have helped a lot of people get to college. And so that support really made it possible for me to apply. So I was accepted to Stony Brook University where I earned my bachelor's in sociology. So while being in Stony Brook, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I got involved on campus, but that's when I discovered something that I never knew existed, which was the field of higher education itself. So that exposure opened up a whole new world for me. I went on to the University of Vermont to earn my master's in higher education and student affairs administration, which I completed over 20 years ago. So Now, something I think is really important to mention is that as a first generation college student, you're not always used to the language of academia, right? The pedagogy, the terms, or even the
Yeah.
pathways that are available. So I remember I moved into my first directorship after earning my degree and after working for a while. And my supervisor told me, you're going to need to think about getting a terminal degree. I had no idea what he was talking about. I had never even heard the term terminal degree. And instead of asking, I just nodded and kept it moving because I just didn't want to look stupid. So that moment just stuck with me because it showed me that first generation college students really, if they don't know what to ask or how to ask, they're not going to know. And sometimes it's being afraid to ask those questions, right? You don't want to look silly and things like that. So fast forward around 2021, I started feeling that itch to grow professionally. I realized I was hitting a ceiling. So after the directorship, what's next? What else
Mhm.
can I do? So I started searching, but I realized that any door into senior leadership required a doctorate, a terminal degree. At that time, I finally figured
Oh.
out what it was. And so I realized that doors weren't opening up because I didn't have that degree. And that was frightening, but it was also clarifying. I had always dreamed of earning a doctorate, but I thought it was unattainable. So I had never seen anyone in my family get hooded, get a doctorate. And again, being first generation, I didn't have any doctors in my family. And so there was no one to really ask these questions. And then in 2021, I had a random conversation with a woman that I had not spoken to in 10 years. Her name is Graciela. She encouraged me to start looking into doctoral programs. She specifically pushed me toward PhD programs because she believed that they were more transferable. So
Mhm.
that conversation just lit a spark. She even connected me to a Facebook group called Latinas Completing Doctoral Degrees that was founded by Dr. Sofia Pertuz, who ended up serving as one of my committee members on my dissertation committee. That was a long
Wow.
story. But I remember posting in the group asking for recommendations on higher ed programs, and honestly, the rest is history. That community gave me the guidance and the confidence I needed to take the leap into a doctoral program.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. And one thing I wanted to mention is I've listened to your commencement speech, and one thing that stood out to me is when you said, if you would have told 17-year-old me that I would have my doctorate, I wouldn't have believed you. And just seeing you now and being able to say, Dr. Kimberly Jones, that just really touched me in a way because I relate to that a lot. Even 17-year-old me wouldn't have believed I could achieve an associate's degree. So I can really
Powerful.
resonate with the level that you have achieved and the success, especially being first gen. And one other thing I wanted to quickly touch on is the racism. I'm from Virginia, born and raised. And that struggle of racism at a young age or while you're still in your K through 12, it really does impact you. And so I just want to commend you in your mother's words of fight them with your mind. That's something that I will keep with me as well. So thank you for dropping those gems and sharing those words of wisdom. And I hope that they can help someone else that may be potentially experiencing the same thing. So,
Yeah, it was quite a journey kind of going through elementary and high school especially. I had a teacher, a drama teacher, who told me I couldn't be in a Helen Keller play because I was too dark to play a white part and I was too light to play a black part. Those were literally her words. And I remember just being shocked. And so, to have teachers in rooms that speak like that to students, it just didn't make me feel included in anything. And it just didn't bring that sense of belonging. So I vowed, I think, after that to really create a space for other people so they didn't feel that way.
thank you for being so open and vulnerable. I really appreciate you sharing that. I had similar experiences. I do recall in kindergarten or first grade, I had a teacher tell me in front of all my white classmates that I had to circle the black box for my race or ethnicity on a test because of the 1% rule. And that came with some bullying, and those experiences really stuck with me and how it made me feel like I wasn't included as well, and like I didn't really belong or fit in. But now I've come to see it almost like a superpower, because when you go through things like that and then choose to leverage them to create space and create change and be an advocate and a voice, that's strength. And I can really see how your experiences are shaping the space you're creating for others to feel like they belong. And that's so powerful. With that in mind, I'd love to ask you, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced in your higher ed journey, and how did you overcome them?
I think the biggest challenge for me entering higher ed was just being a first generation college student. I didn't have anyone to turn to for questions. I didn't feel comfortable asking questions. So maybe there were people at the institution, but I wasn't comfortable asking questions. I didn't want to look like I didn't belong or that I wasn't smart enough. So a lot of the times I just tried to figure things out on my own. I did a lot of shaking of my head, nodding and saying, okay, but not knowing.
Yeah,
And
the fake it until you make it nod.
yes. Oh my goodness. I remember being a student leader and my mentor had nominated me to be part of a committee. I talked about this at a speech I just did, and I said that they were asking for a co-chair. I didn't know what a co-chair was, but it sounded important. So I raised my hand and I volunteered. And I was like, I can do it.
Yeah.
Not knowing what I signed up for or what a co-chair was, but I tried. It's just little things like that, just the nuances of just language, right? And so because I was trying to figure things out on my own, I know that I missed out on resources and support systems that really could have helped me. So to this day, I honestly don't even know if my college offered free tutoring services because I had never learned about them at the time. And that's how disconnected I felt from information that could have made my journey a lot smoother. What made the difference for me was getting involved on campus. When I started joining different clubs and organizations, I began to learn about the resources and opportunities that were available. And that involvement gave me a community. So the community that gave me support. So I also, at that time, leaned heavily on my friends, whom many were first generation college students themselves. And so we were all kind of figuring things out, sending each other emails, trying to kind of navigate through this college life. None of us had a blueprint, but we shared experiences, we encouraged each other, and we kind of made the challenges less overwhelming. I think the other challenge for me was the distance from my parents. So my father, when we moved from Alabama, he had gotten stationed in Maryland. So they were living in Maryland and I was in New York. But I had all my extended family lived in Manhattan for the most part. They lived nearby, but it just wasn't the same. The distance sometimes made me feel very lonely by myself. But again, the involvement on campus helped to kind of fill that gap. It gave me purpose. It gave me people. It gave me a sense of belonging that literally carried me through my whole 4 years. So for me, the greatest challenge was not knowing what to do, where to turn, but the way that I overcame was getting connected, building community, and learning as I went.
With the resources, there were so many things at my community college I had no idea about. But when I got into student government, I was like, oh, you guys have peer support. You have free tutoring. You can go to the writing lab. You can go to the math lab. It was literally like a whole new world just opened up when I took that step from student to student activities, from student into student leadership. It really does open up a door. And if you're not really comfortable with the leadership aspect of it, nobody knows what they're doing when they're in student leadership. I think that's one thing that I just have to say. Nobody knows what they're doing. Sometimes even your advisors are still faking it until they make it. And you would be surprised just how many people have no idea what they're doing, because it's really intended to be a learning opportunity to give you space to grow. But you've really talked a lot about support with overcoming barriers, but how are you able to build lasting relationships, and how does that kind of play into mentorship for you now?
It's a great question. So my family was definitely a huge part of my support system. I think it was especially hard for my mother that I was away at college because she was also raising my two younger siblings at the time. So even with all of that on her plate, she was always there for me. She was and still is my biggest supporter. My father was also supportive, though he was often busy with work. So it was a lot of the day-to-day emotional support really came from my mom. But another big part of my support system was my grandparents. My grandparents lived in Manhattan, so I would go visit them almost every weekend. My grandfather worked at something called a cuchifrito. Cuchifrito is basically a Puerto Rican takeout kind of restaurant or a food counter in the neighborhood where you can buy traditional foods like arroz con gandule, pernil, bacalao. These are some of the traditional foods of the Puerto Rican culture. So on weekends, I'd go to their house, they would feed me, but what was wonderful is that they would send me back with food. And so I would take that food and I would share it with my friends. We would all eat, and that became our little support system: food, community, and care. Especially because a lot of us were running out of points toward the end of the year. So we kind of leaned on each other for these moments of support. As for lasting relationships, I don't think I have a formula. I just kind of stay in touch with people who matter to me. For example, my college roommate, we met when we were both 17 years old, but we've remained best friends for over 2 decades. In fact, she actually attended my doctoral graduation this past July, which was a full circle moment because we started our bachelor's degree side by side. And then here she is years later cheering me on as I finished my doctorate. So that was pretty special. I think what made these relationships so lasting is that, again, we leaned on each other, especially as first generation college students trying to figure things out. And at times it almost felt like survival mode. And maybe that's why part of these bonds were so strong, because it was survival mode. But out of that came deep, meaningful friendships that have lasted a lifetime. And what's so interesting, your last question around mentorship, when I often tell students about student life, I tell them about friendships that can last a lifetime because I know that I have a group of friends from college that I still talk to, that I'm still connected to. I think with mentoring for me, what's important is I remember what it's like to not know anything. I remember what it's like to not want to ask questions. And so how I train students, how I speak and communicate with students, I'm always telling them little things like asking questions. It's a power move. Be curious, walk through doors of opportunity. So I'm sitting there telling them things that I wish somebody would have told me, or even connecting them to people, to resources, things that they just don't know. That's what my responsibility is, to help give them that support. And I think for me, I have a ton of students that I mentor at the college, but I also have students that I still mentor from over the years. So like, for instance, there's a group of students, former students of mine, that we go to dinner maybe every quarter of the year. And so we have kind of a mentoring meeting where we talk about what's been going on, how can we support them, what are some of the challenges that they're experiencing in the real world now. And so it's kind of a full circle moment for me to kind of see them from being an undergraduate. They get their degrees and now they're in the workforce, and now we are colleagues kind of talking about some of the challenges in our work. So for me, mentorship is super important because it prepares our students for the future and to be successful. So that's why I take being a mentor very seriously, and how I approach things is really from a lens of, I don't want you all to feel silly asking questions. I want you to feel comfortable being uncomfortable. That's one of my mantras right there. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you have to ask questions to know the answers. Like I said, it's a super move. It's a power move.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That leads me to my next question. Why does representation matter so much in education and leadership?
For me, representation is really about seeing yourself in spaces you never imagined being. So I remember even at the start of my career asking myself, why don't I see anyone who looks like me? I didn't see any Latinas or even women of color in leadership roles. And when I finally spoke to a white female vice president at a former institution and shared that I had not seen anyone who looked like me, her response was, well, it shouldn't matter. What matters is that women are moving up. I'll never forget walking out of that conversation feeling invisible. She didn't see me. She didn't understand why it did matter, that I needed to see myself reflected in these roles to believe that it was possible. And for a long time, I think that lack of representation kept me feeling stuck, wondering if moving up was even an option for me. But I think that all shifted when I entered my doctoral program. After my first semester, I witnessed something that completely changed me. A Puerto Rican woman named Evelyn, who was being hooded at graduation. I remember that moment so vividly. Her tears, her grit, her resilience, the strength in her voice as she spoke. It was so emotional. It was powerful and it was beautiful. And for the first time, I saw someone who looked like me, who shared my identity crossing that stage. And in that moment, I thought, I want that. I can do that. And so that experience showed me firsthand the power of representation. It wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who would come after me. It became my motivation to finish because I really wanted to model that for others, especially my daughter. My daughter's 17 years old. She's about to go to college. So I needed her to see someone who looks like her earning a degree. And so she wouldn't have to wait for her 30s and 40s to wonder if it was possible. And so for me, representation is important because it affirms belonging. It's about seeing one who looks like you in a place that wasn't originally built for you and knowing that you can take up that space too. So for me, it's not just important, it's really transformational.
I agree wholeheartedly. I also have a 17-year-old daughter as well as a 15-year-old. And when I got your commencement speech video, I immediately sent it to them with the hopes that they might see themselves in you. And, as far as taking up space for a really long time, I thought I needed permission. But last year, I was at Austin Community College as a panelist for Trellis Basic Needs Summit, and the policy analyst I was with told me, we're here to take up space. And I just remember really embracing that. It really empowered me. I needed that. And those people in that room, not many of them look like me, but
Mm.
one of the remarks after I gave my lived experience to connect it to the data, they were like, you could be the future Dr. Tally. And that was a pivotal moment for me because while they didn't look like me, they told me something that I carry with me. And when I got my associates, my sister wrote me a little card, future Dr. Tally. And I have all kinds of jokes with my family now about being a future doctor. So,
I think those folks telling you that this is what they see, I understand that powerful moment. When I interviewed for my doctoral program, Dr. Karen Longman, she was the program director, and she said, I think you would be perfect for this program. What? Me? Oh my goodness. That moment was so special to me because I had never heard it almost felt like a faculty member believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. And I'd never had that happen before. And so that was new for me. So I totally understand that moment and how special it was for you.
and I would encourage listeners to see people. If you see them, speak on it. I've said that a few times here on Freeish. It comes up quite a bit. But just a reminder, if you see someone, let them know you see them. Let them know how great they are and pour into them because that could be their moment. You could
Mhm.
spark something in them that could lead them to unlocking greatness.
Exactly. So years from now, when I talk to the Dr. Tally,
Yeah.
we'll talk about this moment again of how you were like, I saw myself as a doctor. Yes, because you will see yourself as a doctor because it will happen.
I might even send you my commencement speech if I make it to the stage, Dr. Jones. And I'll be playing yours because when I watched it, it made me emotional because as I've already said, I just relate so much. And my daughters look like you. You look like me. It just seeing yourself in someone that's on the stage is just such a powerful thing. I am definitely going to keep that's in my favorited videos on YouTube. And so you might be racking up a lot of views over the years while you're waiting for me to become Dr. Tally. Because
Oh,
I'm going to
thank you.
continue to watch that to keep me inspired.
Thank you.
And that leads me into my last question as we wrap up. What advice would you give to someone just starting to believe that a PhD or their own educational goals is possible for them? What would you say to encourage them?
If I could leave listeners with anything, it would be if you have a dream, pursue it. Don't give up on it, even when it feels far away. Again, I never thought I would get my doctorate degree. It just wasn't in the cards for me as I thought. And so when I began my doctoral program, I walked in with a lot of imposter syndrome. I truly believed that everyone was smarter than me, was more prepared, was more deserving. I questioned my intelligence. I questioned whether I could balance a program with working full time, being a wife, being a mom. So I doubted if I belonged in that space. But what I've learned and what I want others to know is that imposter syndrome lies to you. It convinces you that you're not enough when in reality, you've already earned your seat at the table. I tell my students all the time, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like I said before, that's my favorite mantra, but that's where growth happens. That's where you discover strengths that you never knew you had before. So not every door you encounter will be yours to walk through, but don't let fear stop you from trying the handle. Some of those doors will open into opportunities that change your life if you're willing to step into that discomfort. And remember, you are not alone. You are not walking this path alone. I didn't make this journey by myself. I didn't make it here alone. I carried my family, my mentors, my friends, my ancestors, my students, my whole village with me, and so will you. So my encouragement is this: trust yourself, lean into your community. Don't let fear or doubt define your story. You belong in these spaces. And when you arrive, you're not just arriving for yourself, you're arriving for everyone who comes after you.
That was incredibly powerful advice. And I just want to thank you again so much for lending your voice to my passion project.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, for inviting me to this podcast. This podcast is powerful. It has the ability and potential to really motivate and inspire folks to pursue their dreams, their education. So thank you for having this. I think this is a wonderful platform. I know that I'm going to be sharing it with my students and my colleagues. So I just appreciate you for having this space for people like me who may not have had this opportunity beforehand. So thank you so very much.
You are so welcome, Dr. Jones. If something in this episode moved you or resonated with you, don't be afraid to use your voice or step into your purpose. And if you want to be part of this conversation or have a story to tell, I want to hear it. You can email me at free.ishpodcast@gmail.com. That's free.ishpodcast@gmail.com. You can also DM me on Instagram at free.ishpodcast. We're free-ish, and we're claiming our space unapologetically.